When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to learn methods to transform your life and actively grow into the potential you know is inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. I'm a psychedelic integration and transformation coach, breathwork facilitator, and an enthusiast of personal growth. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn about new methods to bring into your life, give you practices that you can follow, and share stories from practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that is the vital point. My guest on today's episode is Maitreya Wolf. She's a modern mystic, wisdom teacher, soul mentor, musician, dancer, yogini, and lover of the wild earth. Walking the path of soul all her life through many challenges and tremendous beauty has brought her to the place of being a living resource for others on the path of healing and awakening through her various works in teaching, mentoring, performing, writing, and more. And Maitreya and I are part of a mastermind business coaching program with Beth Weinstein. And that's how we met. And was actually really inspired by her recently. We were on a panel together as part of Beth's summit. And there was some things that she said that really sparked my attention, sparked my interest, and really made me say okay, I want to hear more about her story. And we'll definitely get into that later on in the episode. But for now, Maitreya, welcome to the podcast. Yeah, so happy to have you. So let's just start by learning a little bit more about you. Can you tell me a little bit about, your story, your practice, how you got to be here?
Okay. So these questions, I always have to take a moment to be like, which part wants to be said in this moment?
Right.
I have lived a very dynamic life. I grew up in Boston, having a very culture saturated, liberal upbringing. I went to a Montessori school and went to a lot of theater and dance and spent a lot of time at the amazing Boston Public Library, and was blessed, was really super blessed to enjoy a very culturally rich upbringing. And then I also spent my summers in the outback of northwestern Arizona at a ranch camp where I rode horses and did leather work and sat around the campfire singing songs, and really had this balance of a very urban, very culture heavy life with this very wild, very earth centered time. And it stretched my relationship with life to be very, very broad and dynamic. And then over the course of my young life, I was 15 years old when I discovered LSD and started to use LSD pretty regularly. And it was definitely, after going to Montessori school, which is a very unique educational model, which is about following the student's lead for cultivating what they're actually really interested in. I had ended up in public school and in high school in my freshman year. And as soon as I got to public school, I was like, this sucks. I'm not interested in this at all. But I was in Cambridge, Mass, and I went to Harvard Square. And if anyone's familiar with Harvard Square, that's kind of a wild melting pot of all different types of things. And it was there that I discovered LSD. And when I discovered LSD, I was like, okay, this is real, and this is where I want to be. So I spent a long time with LSD, and then when I was 17, I discovered rave culture, and this is like the mid-90s on the East Coast. So the rave culture was pretty epic. It was huge and just magical. And So I went from kind of wild kids on acid to being in the rave and being in all that, and then I went to clubs, and then and then that kind of epoch of my life came to the I like came as far as I could go with the magic of it, and I was getting too deep into the destructive aspect of it, because there was no like containment of elders or containment of tribal culture to hold any of the expansion and awakening and all these other things I was experiencing. It was just like, you know, all out going for the most intense transcendental experience I could access at any given moment through dance and uh, transformative substances. And, with no containment and no model of containment, it kind of ran its course for what could be beneficial about it, and got to be, I got to realizing like this, I'm going to go down if I don't get out of this mode and access something else. So I moved to Maine with my aunt and uncle to nanny for their 6 adopted kids. So it was this incredible about face where I went from just living entirely on my own terms and in my own wild, expansive, transcendental state to suddenly being responsible to this enormous family, but also in the middle of nature for the first time in my life, to actually live in that space. I had gone to that space in the desert, but I had never actually lived in that space. So it was this extraordinary process of awakening at this deep adult level to the healing power of nature. And, lots of things happened over the course of the years between then and now, but it got to be that in my late 20s, after moving to Seattle, I went through a dark night of the soul experience. I experienced a trauma, a really acute trauma that destroyed my life and destroyed my body and destroyed my understanding of myself and my community. And I lost my career and all these other things. And suddenly I was in the underworld in a way I was completely unprepared for. And I had to learn how to be there in a life-giving way. And so the communion of all these different things, of the path of dance, of the path of Western culture at its best with arts and um, literature and these other things, the interwovenness of nature as the foundation for this journey, and the presence of different substances that could help, but I didn't rely on them at that time. All of these things, it was kind of my task in this moment to bridge all of these different aspects of my life into a path that could help me move through the underworld well and harvest its gifts. So I was in this underworld journey for a long time, and at that point I came into contact with the mythology of Ishtar, which is also known as Inanna. So that's the myth of descent, the descent of the Queen of Heaven and Earth to meet her sister, the Queen of Hell. And this is an entire initiatory journey mythology. And then that was helping me through the early stages of the dark night of the soul. And then the myth of Parsifal came in at a later time, which helped me to really settle into to go from how to be in the descent in a life-giving way to how to be in the initiatory process in a life-giving way. So both of these things combined with movements and meditation as it started to come into my life, and yogic practice as it started to come into my life, and a deep and ever-expanding relationship with nature, all of these things started to create this really clear path for me to walk into being a woman of wisdom. And it's not a linear journey, and it's not a straightforward curriculum that you can go lean on. It's just this process whereby life like delivered me into a particular journey and gave me tools along the way to help me continue to deepen in that journey, to help me continue to um, cultivate the wisdom that was being courted forth by these experiences, and cultivate the power that was being courted forth by the experiences. And now at my mid years, I'm in my middle years at this point in my life. Now I've gotten to the place where I've come all the way through the dark night of the soul aspect of my initiation. And the initiation I'm in now is becoming a resource for others as we go through what I consider to be the initiatory portal of our collective experience here on Earth. So, what brings me to this path at this point is that this is kind of the natural arc of the journey that I've been on, but also, from just the very basic human personality level, is like, I want to be the resource that I didn't have in these times when there were times when I was suicidal. There were times when I was so shattered and lost. I thought I'm just never going to find my way. There's no way through this. And life gave me a lot. Like, all of this magical stuff came through to help me, and it was all profound and gorgeous. And also, I was alone on the human level. I was alone through so much of it. I was having to figure it out. I was having to make it work. I was having to develop initiatory consciousness, which, living in a social structure that has annihilated that entire mode, it was an enormous learning curve. And I think it's one of the most important things we can have in our lives that helps us move from being devastated by trauma to finding the path of power through trauma. So that's really what I aspire to do in my work, in my practice, soul power mentoring, is I aspire to give people the tools and the resources and the lenses that will help them to move through their dark night of the soul experiences, their trauma experiences, their grief experiences, their lives, in a way that cultivates their wisdom and cultivates their power. So you're consistently moving towards a place of becoming an elder along the course of your journey. So that's where I can start.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. There's definitely a lot that I resonate with, especially the younger experiences. Also was a rave kid.
Oh, really?
Also using LSD a lot in high school.
Yeah.
Was definitely my first kind of psychedelic sort of guide and ally.
Yeah.
And I can really relate to that experience within the rave environment, where I think I think one way that I would describe it now is unintegrated,
Yeah.
but just noticing the way that I experienced it was like everybody was just in that, like they would go there to start the journey. And like you said, there wasn't any, sort of mentorship or ways to grow within that particular environment.
Yeah.
Um, I had a really close friend and roommate that was a big DJ in LA. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was at one point for a few years was going out 3 to 5 times a week to these different raves. And it constantly seemed like I was seeing people at square one
Yeah.
instead of seeing people that I would watch and grow with them and
Yeah.
change with them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there were the DJs and promoters and people that were in the scene that I would make friends with, but like watching the people that were going to those parties, coming from that place where like I was that person at one point, right?
Yeah.
But and it was like, oh yeah, this is constantly people at this like beginning stage of the journey. And as they evolve and transform, they end up going somewhere else
Mm.
and, continuing that path somewhere else. And like this square on the board is for that beginning. And so just
Interesting.
constantly seeing that churn, so
Interesting.
I can definitely relate to that. And yeah, it was at some point you just have to go, right? You're like,
Well,
okay, this is fun.
I think the piece of it is what I realized for myself in reflection as an older person is that what I was reaching for was a deeper and richer experience of life than what was
Yeah.
offered to me in standard society. Even though I lived a very beautiful, very rich life, I wanted more because I'm an old soul, because I've been here a long time, because I know there's more and I want that more. And when I found those places, when I found those extraordinary settings and the embellishments of the substances and all this stuff, I was like, this is real life. This is real. But what I didn't know at the time was that there was no way to bridge what I experienced there with my daily life. So it actually put me in an adversarial relationship with regular daily life. Like, I don't want to be here in the regular world. I don't want to deal with the world at this level. I want to be here. I want to be here. And in intact cultures, when you go to extraordinary states of consciousness, the intact culture helps you come back to the daily life. Because, for one thing, it recognizes the validity of those extraordinary states. It recognizes that they are transformative and they change you. And it helps you to nurture whatever was emergent there. But in this social setting, in the modern Western society, especially in modern American society, you go to these places of extraordinary expansion, extraordinary awakening, extraordinary revelation. You come back, nobody cares.
Right.
They don't care. They
Go
don't
back to
witness
work.
you.
Yeah.
They don't affirm you. They don't try to nurture what you experienced. They don't honor what you experienced. It doesn't matter. So I found in my youth that, like, I'm here, I'm pursuing this really clear path to like the full expression of my soul. But then I come back into my daily life and I have to fight over its validity. I have to hide it from some, which I never really did much because I'm not a hider, but I have to kind of like keep it over here so they don't know what I did because they're going to make shit about it if they do, or fight about it with people who don't honor what it is and just want me to like get in line, get with the program, get through high school, get to college, get on with it, all this other shit. And I'm like, that to me is an extraordinary poverty in modern American society in particular. And I think in Western society in general, but modern American society in particular is so spiritually and mystically impoverished. Like the mystical experience has been assiduously erased from our social field of validity. It's like this social structure is about how well you fit and what you accomplish and what you accrue materially that you can display to others. Like, look, here's my, roster of accomplishments and here's all the stuff that I've got because of it, instead of this mystical path, which is about the cultivation of the soul, the cultivation of the sovereign self, so that you can actually be what you're here to be in the world, not do what's going to help the default society continue, but actually be what you're here to be. But, we had to fight for it. I had to fight for it. I had to fight for its validity, and I had to continually protect it for myself because so little around me supported it. And there was also the piece of like, a lot of kids, like I could see how people wouldn't support it because, people there who don't have a really strong spiritual compass, who don't have a really rooted self at some level, like, kids go there and just blow their fuses. Like I stopped going to raves when ketamine showed up, because at the beginning when I was first going to raves, ketamine wasn't there, and then all of a sudden ketamine showed up. And I remember it was the 5th time in a row I went to a party and peeled some kid in a K-hole off the bathroom floor and was like keeping them conscious and like, tell me your name, tell me who you're here with, what do they look like, to stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. And I was like, I don't want to be, with this anymore. I don't want to be with this anymore. And if I were a parent or a school official or an authority figure of some kind, and that's what I saw in that experience, like I wouldn't support it. I understood, I understood the complexity of the situation, that not everybody has a really clear compass about what they're doing there. Like I was there for the mystical experience, but not everybody was. Lots of kids were just there like in straight up rebellion or straight up rejection of the status quo or whatever, and they didn't have a compass and they were doing themselves lots of damage, lots of damage. So I totally understood. And I just, bringing it back to, how it's relevant to my life and my walk now is like, I just want to help people to validate their own experience and ground it so that it can be a soul enriching experience and not just like blowing their fuses and then not knowing where to go with it after that point.
Yeah, that's only part of it. You got to be able to take that back and figure out how that fits into the bigger puzzle.
Exactly.
I like that through our coaching program, I've started to follow the content that you put out, and you're a terrific writer. You have like a really amazing way with the words that you use, and you use the word initiation a lot in what you write about. And I'm curious if you could like expand on that a little bit. Earlier you said initiatory consciousness, and just maybe just expand on that that concept a little bit, because it's definitely interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. So I think about this a lot now that I teach about it. And part of the way I hold this is, at this point in our lives, we have the opportunity to make a new relationship with an old power. Like I consider initiation to be one of the old powers that exists in the quantum dimension of reality. So even though modern society, modern Western society and modern American society in particular, has scrubbed almost everything that will help or encourage a soul to cultivate itself on sovereign lines. Everything that ever provided for that possibility on the quantum level, on the energetic or spiritual level, it's all still there. So the old power of initiation is still there. It's still a part of the field, as it were. And how it became a part of my life was, like I was saying, first through the myth of Ishtar. But the myth of Ishtar, when I was with that myth, it was more about the descent and, how do you come out of the false sense of self and come to the annihilation at your antithesis of yourself. You come to this state of annihilation, and then you have to come back and earn back a true sense of self. That's a framework for initiation, but initiation is never actually said in that myth. And it was when Parzival, a friend of mine gave me a book, Snowy Tower by Martin Shaw, and it's a telling of the Parzival myth. And that book is the one that brought the concept of initiation into my life. And when that concept came in, it just put all these things in place for me, like, oh, okay, I understand now more what's happening. I understand that all of this, like, outrageous misfortune that I went through, because it was ridiculous. Like, I've been through like stupid amounts of trauma and hardship in my life, like just unreasonable for, being privileged and all the other things. But I got to realize, like, this is life's way of cultivating me, because everything that arrives to my experience demands a response from a deeper place than I would respond by default. So when I say cultivating initiatory consciousness, what I mean is cultivating a lens. And cultivate means to develop over time by diligent presence and interaction. To cultivate over time a way of relating to your experience that doesn't resist it or judge it as good or bad, or say, I deserve this, I don't deserve this, any of that, but just looks at it and says, what deeper capacity within me is being called forth right now? What deeper capacity within me is being called forth right now? What within me can respond to what I'm experiencing, to what's happening in a life-giving way? So it's a way of being in our lives that avails us of the evolutionary potential of our experience. And I feel like it's really important, because now that we've gotten so trauma sensitive, which I love, because for so long people were just so trauma indifferent and trauma ignorant, but now we're so trauma sensitive that it can be almost too protective. It can be almost too protective, where it's just like we have to insulate and care for and all these other things. And I'm like, we have to do that. Yes, we have to protect. We have to care for. We have to tend. And also, a missing question is frequently, what is the gift here? And not through that new age lens of you create your own experience and everything is for your benefit and all this other stuff. Because I would never look at someone who's been raped, or someone whose house is burned to the ground, or somebody who's been through some horrible, devastating event. I would never look at them and say, oh, well, the divine orchestrated that for your benefit. I would just not do that. But I would say, and I do say in the course of my work with my clients, I do say, okay, so this happened. You can't change the fact that this happened. You can't change the fact that this is happening. What is the most empowered relationship you can have with it? What within you could respond to this in a way that is life-giving, that is empowering, that cultivates you, that makes you greater as a being? That's what I'm really interested in, because given the course of my own life and just like the way things just kept happening, how they say on the radio shows, the hits keep coming, like the hits just kept coming. And I was like, what the fuck? But then there was a point where these concepts, first the concept of this descent to the underworld, which is about let go of how you think it should be, let go of your preferences, let go of your ideas about who you are, let go of your ideas about how anything should be. And then the concept of initiation is who within me can respond to this in an empowered way? And how do I bring that self forward and ground that self so that is the ground that I'm moving from in my life? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about initiatory consciousness. And the reason I say cultivating initiatory consciousness, and I never, ever present it like I'm an initiatory something and I'm going to initiate you, is like I am not an intact cultural container. That's where initiation would happen in the human realm. It's an intact cultural container. That I'm not what that is. What I am is somebody who has developed the capacity to relate to my experience with that same lens, so that when the hits keep coming, I can relate to it in a way that is a path of power and a path of cultivation. And it doesn't devastate me and lay me out and do me in or undermine me in the ways that it used to before I learned how to do that.
It's such a, it's that everything that you just said is so rich to me. Like there's so much substance in it. And it's something that I feel like sometimes I feel like a broken record on this podcast, because I feel like it's something I hear in these different ways from people's experience over and over and over again, that they had this experience that broke them down in some way, that they went into the dark night of the soul, or they had to go into the cave of the hero's journey, or these other frameworks that you've mentioned that I'm actually not too familiar with. But everything that you're saying to me makes perfect sense from the frameworks with which I'm familiar,
Yeah.
so that's another thing that's just so beautiful about it. It's like we can use different language and different myths and different cultural perspectives, and yet we're still talking about the same core concepts, and that's
Right. Right.
just makes it makes my heart sing,
Right. And that's what
but
I
I
mean
what I
too about
hear
having
over
a
and
new.
over.
Well, that's what I mean too
Yeah,
about
no, go
having a
ahead.
new relationship with an old power, is like this thing
Yeah,
exists and this is
right.
how the human endeavor unfolds. If you're on an
Yeah.
evolutionary path, it's how the human endeavor unfolds. And also, if if you're human, you're going to get nailed by life at various times. And it's not because life is malicious, it's because life's. And it's just, it happens all the time, and impact happens. And in every culture, in every system, in every way, like you're saying, there's just like, oh, this transformational opportunity has descended upon me. How do I do this in a good way? How do I do this in a good way? And there is cross culturally, pan globally, in everyone, there is some seed of that question and some condition that's going to bring that seed to life, because this is one of the old powers. This is part of how life works. Life is always looking to cook us into a greater order of beauty. And it always finds its way to push our evolutionary edge. And so, yeah, it does come across the board that this concept is going to show up of like, how do I do this in a life-giving way?
Sometimes I wish that I had a bigger context of humanity, like that I could live for a few hundred years with the consciousness that I have now,
Mm,
because it certainly seems like that awakening, that moment where people are coming to this realization, is accelerating at this point in time.
yeah.
And yet, like you said, there is especially within the wisdom cultures and wisdom traditions that are around, these experiences of like, oh yeah, we have the framework to talk about this and to help guide you through these experiences. So maybe that's just my bias, of like, oh, okay, yeah, this is accelerating now. There's a reason that we are here incarnated on this plane of reality at this particular time. Because that's what it certainly seems like. And it's interesting to me, like watching other people, because I know what my experience has been in the last few years. And obviously, like that was, a shift on a very high level, that affected everybody on the planet in these different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that was immediately evident to me was that we were being presented with a choice, that we could either use this and lean into it and find some sort of wisdom, some sort of opportunity in it, or we were going to push it away and go deeper into that response. And so it was interesting to watch different people in my life either lean in, start to have initiation, start to have awakenings and really big transformational shifts, myself being one of them, and then other people around me like almost spiral down a few levels, like
Mm-hmm.
go deeper into the darkness and the fear and the the other side of what was being sort of presented in that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um I don't want, like, I know we don't have to get into this in depth if you don't want to, but like I noticed you just posted about your relationship with your mom and her going through an awakening fairly recently in the
Mm-hmm.
last few years. And my mom, same thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
my mom, all of a sudden in the last few years, all of a sudden connected with like this higher consciousness, and like some of the things that we're able to talk about I would have never in a million years like imagined as a kid, like, oh, my mom and I would be talking about like Pleiadian, energy and, like
Yeah.
higher dimensional consciousness and,
Yeah.
like what? No, like you
Yeah.
got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just it's amazing to be here in this moment in time and like to be a part of it in a small way, even
Yeah.
if I'm just observing and learning through other people's experience and getting to hear other people like you explain it with your wisdom. And like I said, like it's something I hear on this podcast over and over and over again, is like I went through this experience and on the other side of it was this freedom and this desire to help others and this beauty,
Yeah.
and appreciation for the entire experience, even if what I went through was horrible, like you said, and like you wouldn't ever like say go whatever, go trauma, like that's not what we're here to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you're absolutely like I absolutely agree with you. I love what you said earlier about going from the devastation of trauma to the power of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much power in that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Like for
Yeah.
me, I came into this like going, like I came out of, a breathwork facilitating training going, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this, but I've been working on my complex trauma and all the things that I grew up with, with plant medicine, with breath work for the last couple of years. So I think that's where I'm supposed to go, because I understand trauma. And then I had a acute injury and acute shock trauma that completely shattered my world and completely changed my understanding of what trauma was. And it was like, oh wow, there's levels to this shit. And like I understand it a little bit because I've been messing around the edges of this complex stuff, stuff I've been living with for my most of my life. But this is a completely different level, and it completely transformed like the empathy that I have for people,
Yeah.
the way that like my understanding of like what people are walking around with, like trying to cope with and deal with and soothe,
Yeah.
and also how I could help in some way, with the resources and tools that I've learned.
Right.
So
Right.
I would love to hear more about the, how one goes to from the devastation to the power, because there's um, a lot of wisdom there.
Right. Right. And there is a lot there altogether. So
Yeah.
part of what I'm gathering myself something that's interesting in the emergence of trauma sensitivity in our society and in our therapeutic modalities and our communal spaces and everything else is that we we relate to everything through the Western lens, which is hasty. The Western lens is immensely hasty and impatient and pushes towards um, pushes towards peak experiences all the time and pushes towards happiness all the time. Like uh, there's there's a huge impatience with the liminality of grief. There's a huge impatience with the unknown in all kinds of ways because it doesn't because it like drags on the society's um, impulses to fulfill itself. So when we're relating to trauma in ourselves or in others, as like people dealing with our own material or practitioners supporting other people in whatever way, or community members, I'm very on the community tip at this point in my life. So community members dealing with, trauma in the community setting. There's this really incredibly nuanced sensitivity that needs to be present for the process to become evolutionary, for the process of integrating and uh, growing through trauma to become evolutionary. Because at the outset, when trauma is new, it just needs to be acknowledged. Like it just needs to be honored. If somebody had tried to come like straight into my trauma when I was 29 and be like, well, here's initiation, you should relate to it through this lens, I'd have been like, fuck you. Just fuck you. Get away from me. Because I was destroyed. And the first thing I had to do was just like find any way to settle into the reality that my life had been destroyed. And everything that I was doing, everything I thought I was, everyone I thought was with me was gone. It was all gone. And in its place was just a staggering amount of pain, all different types of pain. So the first thing there is like, you have to be able to like curl up around that and just be with yourself in that. And anybody who's there in that, like all they should be doing is holding you with love, just holding you with love. And then when you start to find your ground, you naturally over time will start to find your ground if you don't like latch on to and invest too deeply in the fear of it happening again, which is really natural. It's a natural fear that comes up. Like once you've been through something like that, your trust in life can be just annihilated along with everything
Yeah.
else. So you fear more coming. Um, that's something that has to be worked through on its own. It's this kind of what they call in permaculture succession. Like there's stages to it, and you have to have a certain you have to have a certain level of resource to be able to start to engage the initiatory possibility, engage the evolutionary possibility. You have to have a certain level of resource, and that resource has to be developed. Like I couldn't have started there. And it's the decompressor on the building. I couldn't have started there. But I got there, and I got to a place of resource. I got to a place of ground. And then I was able to start relating to the experience as I continued to integrate the reality of the trauma. As I continued to integrate it, I was able to start to relate to it through that lens of like, what deeper capacity is being called for in me here. And when you get to that place, which is a successionary process, then you step into the field of responding to your experience differently than you would in the past. And this is an interesting thing. I think it was Caroline Miss who a bunch of years ago started to talk about the culture of woundedness, where she, as a transformational healer, kind of got really impatient with this new thing of like, suddenly we're all wounded and we just all need to be like coddled in that woundedness. I could understand her frustration because it is easy to get lost in the trauma body. It's easy to get lost in the trauma body, and it's easy to be to kind of like back in there and stay there for longer than is actually restorative. And so in the course of my work with people, depending on where they are, like I don't take people into my practice who are fresh out of hugely devastating traumas. I'm like, you actually need therapy right now, and I'm not a therapist. Like you're in a different place with this. You need to be coddled right now. You need to be insulated. You need to just sit there and lick your wounds and heal a bit. You need to like learn about this new reality that you're in now that this trauma has happened or is happening in your life. Like you need that time to just be protected and supported in that space. When I bring people into my practice, I'm bringing people who are a little farther out from the moments of impact than that. The people who have found a little bit of ground and are like, okay, how do I harvest the gift? How do I continue to integrate, and how do I harvest the gift here? So for me, it takes a lot of sensitivity to really know what's going to support somebody at whatever stage they're in. And it takes a lot of humility on my part as a practitioner to just say, like, I'm not the thing you need right now, or I am the thing that would support you right now. But what it all comes down to for me at a really basic level is that I believe that in any impactful situation or experience, there is an invitation. There is an opportunity. And I believe too that once that opportunity has been introduced into your life, it's there. It's like your curriculum. It's your curriculum. Like that is yours to realize the opportunity. And what I have found over the course of my life and what I've found in working with people is that if you deny, not miss, but deny, like actively push away or reject an evolutionary opportunity, it's going to come back at higher volume because it's on your curriculum. And if it's on your curriculum, the best thing to do is just accept that it's on your curriculum and dance with it. Like just dance with it. Don't make it try to get your attention again. You don't want that thing to have to come back again. You know? So that's where I take people who have their own desire. Like, I'm never going to force anybody to do anything, but if somebody has their own desire to evolve through their hardships, to harvest the gift and learn how to give it in whatever way, whether that's through how they offer, how they live, or what they do, or whatever, but I take people who want to harvest the gift of their hardships and learn how to give it, and I support them in doing that in whatever way I can, and with whatever tools I have that are going to be relevant to their journey. So I think that's always the possibility with the traumatic experiences, is that once you gain your ground, and you have to be gentle and patient and compassionate in the process of gaining your ground. Once you gain your ground, then you start to say, in what way is this inviting me to become a greater version of myself? So that's what I mean when I say moving from the devastation, like just being leveled by trauma and then being like, oh, I'm so traumatized, I just, I can't do such and so, or, it's just like this anymore, or whatever. Like giving your power away, which is, it's not, what's the word? It can be kind of a natural progression to give your power away to the trauma if you don't know that it's possible to do something else. But what I'm interested in is helping people to harvest the power that's there for them in the experience so that they can stand up taller in their life and become a refuge and a resource through that experience, so that they can become the greater version of themselves that is being courted by life.
Yeah, what's coming up for me is there's a grieving process within trauma.
Mm-hmm.
There's a death.
Mm-hmm.
There's a a time of needing to grieve and letting the part of you that was there before the trauma die, and grieving that loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there's a new birth, because right, new rebirth comes after death,
Mm-hmm.
when we're in this infancy, in this newborn stage, we do need to be coddled. We do need to be cared for and protected, because on a certain level we're helpless. We're relying on the safety of others outside of ourselves, and we rely on those stewards, or those caretakers, those shepherds, however you want to say it, to get us to the point in our lives where then we are ready to make the next transition out of this helplessness into adulthood, into man or womanhood. And in ancient cultures, there would be an initiation, there would be a ceremony of some sort to mark that transition, to say you're no longer a boy, now you're a man, or no longer a girl, you're now a woman. And so it sounds like you're able to, through your work, to act in that role of taking people through that initiation that has been lost in a large way in the world that we're living in now, after they've
Yeah.
gone through the rebirthing, and after they've gone through that sort of infant stage, and they're starting to come out of the cocoon of needing to be cared for and coddled.
Well, like I was saying earlier, I specifically am not an initiator. I'm not that. And what I can do for people is give them tools, practices, resources. I can help them to develop the ability to relate to their experience in that way so that they find their way through it. And what I can do, over, like, depending on how long I work with somebody, what I can do is kind of course correct, course correct, course correct, course correct. I can ask the questions, I can offer the guidance, I'm at the beginning of being a wise elder, so I can be like, I have some clients sometimes that I'm like, okay, this is what's happening for you. Where are you going with this? And I get them to think about it. Where are you going with this? Where have you gone with this so far? Where has this mode or this way or this process brought you to so far? Is that where you want to be? Is that a life-giving thing for you? And by life-giving, I mean, I use this phrase like it's really natural for me, but it's not common. By life-giving, I mean, is this something that is vital? Like you say, the vital point. Like, is this something that is vital and enlivening? And does it create the space for you to embody your life more fully and to be what you actually are more fully? Or does it interrupt that ability? So what I'm doing, like what I'm trying to do more than anything, is to help people cultivate wisdom. Because we live in a society in which wisdom is sorely lacking. And wisdom is the thing that helps us to go through our lives, and especially our hardships and like our overwhelming blessings. It's something I realized in the last couple of years, that we can be as overwhelmed by good things happening sometimes as we can by bad things, especially if we don't expect good things to happen. We can be like all weirded out by that and tear it apart because it's not part of our story. But yeah, what I want to help people do is cultivate their wisdom so that they can relate to their experience in a life-giving way, so that they can actually stand in their power and be in that power for whatever they're here to be in the world. Because everybody, one of the central tenets of my work is that you are the only you there will ever be. Ever. Ever. That's it. Here you are. You've got 80 to 110 years, more or less, God willing, good food and good water, all the things. You've got like a very short period of time to be what you are, but here you are. This is it. This is your life. What are you here to be? And not what are you here to do necessarily, because we're such an action oriented society that it's like, well, how does my purpose become my profession? It's like, your purpose may or may not become your profession, but your purpose is like, what are you here to be in the world? What particular energy are you here to be? What particular medicine are you here to bring forward into this extraordinary time? Like we mentioned earlier, the awakening, the awakening of our parents and all this other stuff. I look at it like we're in this extraordinary awakening time. We're in this extraordinary transformational time. And each of us are here to be something in that process. And that something has a do something component, but it's an energetic thing we're here to be. And what I'm doing in my work is helping people align with that through cultivating wisdom and through cultivating initiatory consciousness so that they can relate to their experience in a way that makes space for that deeper magic that they are to breathe into life through their embodied self.
Yeah. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we were on a panel together and talking about our journey to entrepreneurship and what we did in our work and what our work was about. And you spoke about one of the tools and practices that you use in your work, and it deeply resonated with me. And that was contemplating or meditating on death. and impermanence.
Mm-hmm.
And this really lit me up personally because um, while I feel like not everybody is ready to sit there and say like, hey, let's talk about death, and it's not necessarily something that people are always comfortable with. um, in my own journey, when I would say that the first sort of chapter of my awakening was discovering Buddhism, and it took me to Tibet, where I lived for a year. And the beginning of the Tibetan Buddhist path is all about meditating on death. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting because, especially in the West, um, we want the sexy stuff. We want the hasty path. Like we want to rush into the tantric initiations and the visualizations and like the really sort of high level stuff. And I was fortunate enough to get involved in a lineage where they really said like, yeah, all that stuff is great, but if you don't have a foundation in these really fundamental principles, then you can't get to the higher floors of the building because your building's going to collapse. And so the real like the real sexy stuff is actually in these fundamentals. It's really just the really basic, what other lineages would call the preliminaries. Like, no,
Right.
this is the real thing. This is where you should actually be placing your time and focus and meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so within that context, it's contemplating and meditating and studying on the profundity of the blessing that you've been given, that you have a human life, and thinking about what you can accomplish with that, the opportunity that you've been given, as a way to motivate you to step into that path that you're here to be.
Right.
Not necessarily, like you said, the things to do, but who am I here to be, and what gifts have I been given to step into that and to discover that, and really focusing on that to begin with, and then to follow that up with contemplating on this fact that we don't really like to think about, which is that we're all given a finite time with this particular gift, and that with each breath, that gift is actually, being used up, and that one day we have to go, and that death is a part of that. And
Mm-hmm.
not in this morbid way, but again, in this way of realizing what an beautiful opportunity that we have, and
Yeah.
to, to motivate us to step into that power, to step into that purpose. And um I had a lot of books that I was reading and interested in before I went to Tibet. I only took one book with me when I went to the monastery. And that book had a lot of, I focused on those meditations about death a lot. And in these very like elaborate, these it's incredible, like the richness of the Buddhist tradition, that there are
Yeah.
these like doctorate level
Yeah.
monks and scholars that can sit there and like go into death, and like how to meditate on death, and like
Mm.
make it into this like very elaborate, like, okay, well, this is why, and this is why, and this is why that. And I feel so fortunate that I took that time and I had that opportunity to study and to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you started talking about, working with people and meditating on death, and I got really excited
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
not only was it something where I'm like, oh yes, this is this has been a part of my journey. But I feel like with this podcast, talking about different transformational practices, it's something that I haven't had really the chance to share with the audience and give them something that they can, I love to offer practices and give
Mhm.
them something to like actually take back with them into their world and into their work outside of these amazing conversations and hearing amazing stories from people like you. So I would love to hear a little bit more first about how you use that practice in your work and maybe
Mhm.
in your own life. And then, yeah, I would love to just get into um, a practice that the audience could follow along with.
Okay. So I came to death meditation by my relationship with my mother. Um, I'm the only child of a single parent. So for a long time, any thought of my mother passing, I would panic. Like a passing thought, I'd be fine. I'd be in the middle of a day, I'd just be fine doing whatever I'm doing. And then all of a sudden, I'd have this thought about my mother dying, and I would freak out. And at first I was just kind of like, whatever, that's how it is. I just freak out when I think about my mom dying. But then after a while, I was like, why do I freak out about that? And I realized that as Americans, as American Westerners, we live in a death phobic society that treats death as an invader, an aberration, a violation, and a failure, which is a total psychosis, like a total unconscious psychosis in our collective psyche. Like it's crazy. It makes us crazy to fear and revile death at that level, because death is how life ends. It just is, no matter what. Plants die, bugs die, animals die, people die. Like that's how life goes. You die. Like if you're here, you're gonna die. And in any non-Western culture, especially, you're gonna be like face to face with that all the time, you know. But I'm trying to learn how to speak of just American Western society, because it's different than even other Western societies. But in American Western society, we are like neurotically insulated from death in a way that leads to a terror that colors our days. And I started to realize that I needed to change that about my mother, because my mother is going to die. So I was like, okay, my mom is going to die. So I started meditating on my mother's death. And I just, every week or so, I would dedicate at least an hour to imagining my mother passing. And the process of it was intended that the terror would soften into an acceptance of this very natural thing. So I did that with my mother in the beginning, and then I started to do it with myself, but I started to do it with myself in a different way, because I realized that I wasn't fully living. And I started to recognize that through the perspective of realizing, like, I'm incredibly gifted. I'm made that way. I'm talented at like a staggering amount of things. And I don't do them a lot of times. Like, I just don't do it. And I started to look at that like, what the fuck, do I think I'm going to live forever? Like, this is my time to learn how to play this instrument or write this book or, do this dancing or, learn these skills or whatever I'm going to do. Like, this is it. This is my time. But I'm just kind of disconnected from that. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But one of them is because not having a relationship with death, you don't really have a relationship with life. And this comes back to the initiation thing. The initiation brings you into a very direct relationship with death, with your death, with all death. And that is part of what is intended there, is that you will come more fully into life in that way. So I started doing it with myself. And then when I started to work with people, I started to introduce that into my practice. And it's not something I do with everybody. It's, you can only really do it with people who are ready for it. But
Right.
because we're terrified of it. I work with American
Mm-hmm.
Westerners, and American Westerners are terrified of death. And it's like, you don't start there with many people.
Right.
Like, some people are ready, like, let's do this. And some people are just like, it would just be too much, and that's fine. It's fine. But it's always kind of there. I'm like, when is it going to be time for this? So, how I've started to do it with my clients is when they're really kind of whirlpooling on something, like they're just there and they're just stuck, and they're just kind of like indulging in being stuck, and not like because they're failing at anything or anything, but just because like that's how their system is kind of set up, is to just indulge being stuck in this way. Sometimes that's the place where it's like, okay, so let's imagine that you are going to die, Let's like go and visit your dying time, and let's kind of unlock this tangle. And I also do it in the place of somebody not really being able to make full contact with what they care about, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if they can't actually feel their passion for something, part of the death meditation is like you go in there, and at the end of your life, while you're sitting there recognizing you're about to go dark and go back to the spirit world, what do you appreciate about your life and what do you regret? And the appreciation and the regret both tell you what you care about in different ways, you know? And the regret has kind of a particular traction to it that I think is really important, because nobody wants to get to their deathbed and be full of regret. Like, you want to get to your deathbed and be like, I lived beautifully, and I'm ready to let go, And sometimes you can lose contact with what you care about. You can lose contact with what matters to you for 1,000 different reasons and 1,000 more, And death meditation is one way to come back to that, and it's also one way to like get over fear. Like, if you're afraid to do something, if you're afraid of the consequences, if you want to, if you're drawn to it, but you're just afraid of it, it's like, well, what if you got to your death and you hadn't done it? How would you feel? You know?
Yeah.
So it's all these different things about, coming into deep relationship with life, really coming into deeper relationship with life. And like you said, really understanding the profundity and the preciousness of the gift that you are sitting in right now. This breath, the next breath, the next breath, the next breath. Like, this is it. You're sitting in it right now. This is the moment that you have to be the thing that you are right now. And you can lose sight of that. You can lose sight of that. And it's not a failure to lose sight of that. It's just something that can happen. And death meditation helps you come back to that preciousness. And my aspiration with death meditation is never to like scare or shame or cajole anyone into anything, but really just to bring them into direct contact with like the miracle of my life, the miracle of living. Come into direct contact with that, and then, get up from wherever you're doing the meditation and like go forward in your day from that place of deep contact with that miracle.
Yeah.
So that's what it all comes down to. And if you're ready to do a little practice, we can do that. Usually when I'm working with clients, it's very specific to them. So I was thinking about how to do this in the more generalized setting of like anybody who's listening can do this. And so it'll just be like 5 or 10 minutes that will just go through a little meditation, a little visualization. And then I would encourage anybody who's listening to, you could pause the recording or you could in some way give yourself the space to take some notes afterwards so that you can actually reflect on whatever you discover in this practice after the fact. Okay, so I'm ready when you are, Jonathan. Just let me know.
Yeah, whenever you are.
You ready?
Thank you. Thank you for offering this.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for inviting me. So go ahead and take a nice, long, slow, deep breath into the belly. And as you exhale, you can exhale through an open mouth with a sigh. And in that exhalation, you can really give your body to the embrace of gravity. And you can continue to let your breath deepen into the body. Continue to let your body rest into the embrace of gravity and really start to feel the density of your body as you sink into gravity. And in this moment, imagine for yourself some space of containment, whether that be a comfortable room, a grove of trees, a special spot in nature or anywhere else that you love. Just imagine yourself in a field of containment as you continue to let the density of your body rest into the embrace of gravity. Now in that place, ever so gently, we are going to lean towards the presence of death in our lives. So in that safe space that you found for yourself to rest for these next few moments, you can start to open your imagination to the presence of your own death. Recognize that death is the way that every life ends. Recognize that every life ends, and that is natural and perfect and beautiful. And start to just open yourself energetically and imaginally to the presence of how your particular life, this life, is going to end. And let the feeling of it open in your body. What's happening in that moment, in the last hours of your embodied life? Where are you? What do you see? And what do you feel? Whatever you see and whatever you feel, just welcome it with curiosity and compassion. And then from that place, resting imaginally in the last moments of your life as this you that you are now, let your awareness stretch out over the journey that you have had as a life. The person and the personality that you have been for the duration of your time as the you that you are now. Begin by just letting your awareness explore the long view of that territory and just see, feel, hear, experience whatever's there. And then, as your body continues to sink into that gravity, I invite you to look into this view of your life and be with, for a moment, the things that you haven't done. And be with the things that you let pass you by. Opportunities, people, moments. Be with, for just a moment, just touch on what you feel like you missed. What you feel like you didn't do. Let yourself just be present to whatever arises in that particular way of looking. And just behold it with as much compassion as you can, but really feel how it feels as well to look back and really fully see the paths not taken, the experiences not had, the connections not made, and the thresholds not crossed. And now we're going to turn our attention softly towards all that you have experienced. The opportunities you did take, the thresholds you did cross, the connections you did make. Let your awareness travel back through the arc of your life and really see from this moment of its completion everything you said yes to. Everything that you appreciate in the choices that you made. From this imaginal moment of your life's completion, look back at everything in your journey that you feel good about. And let that feeling open in your system. Feel that all the way through your bones and your blood. And let yourself really fully appreciate that. Now we're going to gently turn our attention to beholding all that we have seen in these moments with compassion. Whatever you have seen in this meditation, whatever you have felt in this meditation, give yourself this moment to receive the message that sends to you about how to be more fully in your life right now, today, tonight, tomorrow, and from here on. Receive that message all the way through your bones. Let it flow through your blood. Let it saturate your muscles. Welcome the message from your deep self, from your imagination of the end of your life. Welcome the message that is sent from that place about how to live more fully now while you're here. And then take one nice, long, slow, deep breath, honoring yourself for walking through this moment as you let the imagining of the end of your days soften and recede, and you breathe yourself back into the present right now. Feel your body wherever you are in this moment. Feel the breath in your lungs. Feel the beat in your heart. And feel the gift of your life right now. And on the count of 3, we will emerge from this space. Deep breath in. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
You are welcome.
Appreciate you offering that.
Mm-hmm.
And appreciate you, the listener, or perhaps you're watching this, for being open to exploring this topic. Because there's so much richness, there's so much to, I don't want to say gain, but yeah, gain from it, from contemplating it. And like other topics that we've been talking about during this podcast, it's really connecting back to a deeper wisdom and understanding of the world and the different levels and energies and spaces within it. So thank you so much, Maitreya.
Mm-hmm. You're so welcome, Jonathan. It's such an honor to be here and share with your people in this way. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I pray that you who are listening or watching or receiving this are well nourished by this journey. Thank you for sharing your time in this way.
Aho. Well, as we transition into the end, where can people go if they want to connect with you or work
Yeah,
with you?
so I have a website. It's called soulpowermentoring.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Maitreya Wolf and or Maitreya Wolf Sacred Arts. You could go to either of those places and look for Maitreya Wolf and you'll find me. I have music online on Spotify, Apple, and Bandcamp. So you can put Maitreya Wolf into any of those spaces and find some music. And I also have a YouTube channel. I've only got a few subscribers, so you'd have to look for Maitreya Wolf and then follow the links to get to the homepage. But yeah, Soul Power Mentoring is a great place to find me and to get in touch. You can go there and sign up for my email list and learn about my offerings and hear about when I'm going to be doing either online or in person groups and classes and everything else. And I do have space in my practice if anybody is looking for this kind of evolutionary mentoring. I would love to talk with you and explore the possibilities.
Yeah, awesome. We'll definitely put those links on the show page for this as well. So, wow, what a amazing conversation. I think this surpassed what I was hoping for, and there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of good richness to unpack and to digest out of this conversation. And I know I'm looking forward to listening to it again as I edit through it and get it ready for, uh, you know, YouTube and the audio platform. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience.
Oh, it's such an
It's really a
honor, such a
pleasure.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really glad to have been here together today.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm glad I listened to that little intuition. You know, it's something that I'm learning to trust more. That
Yeah.
sometimes there's just these little, like, hey, you got to pay attention. Don't let it go by. You
Yeah, exactly.
know. Well, awesome. If you've enjoyed this episode, please connect with Maitreya. Like I said earlier, her content is really rich and thought provoking and beautiful, very poetic, and I always enjoy, reading what she has to say. So I would definitely recommend connecting through Facebook or her social media presence. And yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for being a part of the Vital Point. Would appreciate you leaving a review or subscribing if you're watching on YouTube as we build that channel out, and leaving a review on whatever audio platform you're listening to. And until next time, keep practicing. Continue to connect to that space within yourself that we just just connected with, because really there's only so much that we can do by talking, and the real vital point is to practice, to bring this experience into your life through meditation, through contemplation, through integration, no matter how that looks to you. So until next time, my friends, keep practicing.
Blessed be.